It was just another ordinary morning at the army camp, until the canine froze in his tracks. At first, no one understood why he was barking so fiercely at the cook, a man everyone trusted. But the dog wouldn't back down. Days later, soldiers uncovered something buried beneath the kitchen floors, and the truth shook the entire camp. And the question that still lingers is this: what was the cook really hiding, and how far did it go? Here's the full story. But before we continue, comment your favorite dog's name down below and hit that subscribe button. The army camp sat tucked away in the hills, built on soil hardened by years of drills, discipline, and a rhythm so predictable that every soldier knew where he had to be at every hour of the day. The mornings began with the same sounds: boots hitting gravel, flags raised high against the wind, the steady echo of cadence calls rolling through the yard. Everything at that camp worked with precision. Every man, every rifle, every step. Nothing was supposed to fall out of line. Except on one morning, something did. The camp's K9 unit, known for its flawless obedience, suddenly broke routine. Rex, a German shepherd with a reputation for sharp instincts and flawless training, had been brought into the camp months earlier after proving his worth in narcotics detection. Unlike the other dogs, Rex had a peculiar intensity. He noticed the details no one else did. To his handler, Sergeant Miller, it felt like Rex's instincts worked faster than logic itself. On that morning, the soldiers filed past the mess hall as they always did, trays clattering, boots grinding against concrete. The camp cook, a man whose presence had always blended into the background, stood by the kitchen's back door, his apron dusted with flour. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious, the kind of image no one would ever look twice at. But Rex did. As Miller passed by with Rex on leash, the dog stiffened. His ears shot forward, his nose flared, and his body grew tense in an instant. Miller knew the signs well. It was the same posture Rex used when he detected something that did not belong. Then came the first bark, sharp, sudden. It made heads turn. Soldiers paused mid-step, some nearly colliding into each other. Rex lunged toward the cook, the leash pulling tight, his bark echoing against the steel walls of the mess hall. At first it looked absurd, a well-trained K9 losing control over the camp's own cook. Men chuckled, some shook their heads. The cook raised his palms, startled, his face twisted in confusion. He had been in this camp long enough to know the men by name. He was the last person anyone would suspect, but Rex would not stop. The bark came again, harder this time. His teeth showed, his tail locked stiff, his body lowering as though preparing for a takedown. Miller's grip tightened, but even he could feel it. This was not random agitation. Rex had caught something hidden, something wrong. A silence spread through the yard. No one was laughing anymore. Soldiers exchanged uncertain glances. Why would the dog bark at a man who had served them meals for years? What was different this time? The commanding officer ordered Miller to pull Rex back, but the German shepherd resisted. His nose was locked onto the cook, his body vibrating with determination. Miller knew better than anyone. When Rex latched onto a scent, he did not release it unless there was a reason. The cook, visibly shaken now, tried to steady himself, muttering excuses about spices, food smells, and perhaps meat clinging to his apron. But Rex did not bark at food. He barked at threats. And that raised the first question no one dared voice aloud. What was the cook hiding? The decision was made to quietly detain the cook for questioning. The camp's order had always been strict. When a trained K9 raised an alert, no matter the target, it had to be investigated, no exceptions. As soldiers escorted the cook away, Miller could feel Rex's body ease slightly, but his nose kept twitching, trailing the air as though catching traces invisible to human senses. Miller's stomach tightened. If Rex was right, this was no small mistake. That night, whispers spread through the barracks. The cook had always been there, smiling, quiet, serving food without issue. Some soldiers swore he had helped them sneak in an extra bread roll. Others remembered him as the man who fixed meals when storms knocked out supply routes. How could such a familiar face be the subject of suspicion? But beneath the curiosity was a deeper unease. The timing. The military had recently tightened security, with new shipments of classified equipment moving in and out of the base. For a K-9 to suddenly alert at the cook, the man who handled the soldiers' meals every day, made some wonder. Was there more at stake here? The first search yielded nothing. His quarters were clean, his belongings ordinary. A few books, neatly folded clothes, cooking utensils, old family photographs, nothing that screamed danger. Some soldiers began to scoff. Maybe Rex had been distracted, maybe the smell of raw meat had triggered him. But Miller knew better. He had seen Rex track narcotics hidden in fuel tanks, locate weapons buried beneath soil, and even sense explosives packed inside seemingly harmless containers. The dog did not make mistakes. If Rex had barked, then something was there. But what? That question gnawed at Miller. Over the next 2 days, Rex's behavior did not return to normal. Every time Miller took him near the mess hall, the dog stiffened again. His nose pointed toward the kitchen, his ears locked forward, his body restless. Not just when the cook was there, always near the same spot. The air carried something Rex could smell but no human could identify. Miller reported this to his superiors. Some rolled their eyes. Others, more cautious, authorized a deeper inspection. They ordered the mess hall walls, storage cabinets, and delivery crates checked. Still, nothing. Flour, grains, dried beans, normal supplies. Yet Rex's insistence only grew stronger. And then, on the third night, another detail emerged. A young soldier recalled seeing the cook lingering around the supply trucks longer than necessary during deliveries. At the time, it had seemed harmless. After all, he was the cook. But now, the memory burned brighter. What if those extra minutes meant more than simple curiosity? The puzzle began to take shape. A K-9 barking, a man too ordinary to question, a supply route running into the camp at odd hours. Soldiers began whispering about sabotage, about spies, about hidden hands reaching into places no one expected. The tension thickened. Trust inside the camp grew fragile. Every sound, every crate, every shadow felt different now. Miller lay awake that night, Rex resting at his side, the dog steady breathing a small comfort in the dark. But Miller could not shake the unease. Rex had never failed him before. If the dog was this insistent, then somewhere inside that mess hall or with that cook, there was something hidden, something big. The soldiers wanted answers. The officers wanted certainty. And Miller knew one thing with unshakable clarity. Rex was not barking at nothing. The cook was not who he appeared to be. And the true discovery, whatever it was still waiting to be unearthed. Morning at the camp felt heavier than usual. The soldiers marched in their drills, rifles slung across their backs, boots stomping the ground in perfect rhythm. Yet beneath the order and discipline, something unseen stirred in the air. Conversations were shorter. Eyes darted faster. Trust felt thinner. And at the center of it all was the mystery that no one could ignore. The dog who barked at the cook. The cook himself had been restricted to his quarters. He was not locked in a cell, but guards stood outside his door, rifles at the ready. He protested, insisting he was innocent, swearing the dog was wrong. But no one dismissed the warning. The rules of the military were clear. If a K-9 raised suspicion, every lead had to be pursued, no matter how unlikely. Inside the mess hall, Rex continued to circle the same spot. Miller watched him closely. Each time they entered, the German shepherd's body grew tense, his nose low, tail stiff. He would scratch at the edge of the floorboards near the kitchen storage area, then back off only to return again. Something was buried there. Miller felt it in his gut. But every inspection turned up nothing. The floorboards were pried open, the walls checked, the crates emptied. Nothing. Just the ordinary smell of grain, flour, and supplies. Yet Rex would not give up. This persistence made soldiers uneasy. Some began whispering that maybe the cook was not acting alone, that perhaps others were involved, hiding something that even searches had failed to uncover. Suspicion spread like wildfire, touching even those who had nothing to do with the mess hall. A few soldiers started watching their comrades more closely. Trust that had once come easily now cracked at the edges. The officers ordered a full background check on the cook. The results shocked many. On the surface, the cook's records were clean. Employment history, identification, references, all in order. But a closer look revealed gaps, months unaccounted for, references that led nowhere. And most troubling of all, a travel record that suggested he had spent time near border regions notorious for smuggling and intelligence leaks. The whispers grew louder now. Could it be that the camp cook was not a cook at all? Still, without concrete evidence, suspicion remained just that, suspicion. But the soldiers began to look at every tray of food differently, every delivery with sharper eyes. The bond that tied the camp together began to fray, and Rex only added to the tension. Every day, without fail, he would bark and claw at the same storage area in the mess hall. Sometimes, after training drills, soldiers would gather just to watch him, their curiosity sharpening like knives. The dog was relentless, never fooled, never distracted. His instincts screamed that something was there. But why could no one see it? Then came the second incident. During an evening drill, one of the soldiers collapsed. At first, it looked like exhaustion. The camp medic rushed in, checked his vitals, and stabilized him. But what followed sent ripples of fear across the camp. The medic discovered traces of something in the soldier's canteen water, something that should not have been there. The investigation pointed to the mess hall supplies. Though no proof linked the cook directly, the suspicion tightened its grip. The soldiers no longer looked at the man with confusion. They looked at him with fear. And Rex, the dog who had started it all, became the center of everything. To the soldiers, Rex was no longer just a canine. He was the one thread pulling loose a truth none of them wanted to face. Days passed. The officers authorized a deeper inspection of the supply chains. Each truck, each crate, each delivery was checked with Rex leading the search. His nose guided the soldiers more than any paperwork or inspection list ever could. And then finally a break came. Rex alerted to a delivery crate that appeared ordinary, filled with sealed bags of rice. But as the soldiers emptied it, the dog's nose kept pressing against the bottom. When they pried open the crate's false base, their hands froze. Hidden inside were coded documents, microchips, and unmarked packages whose contents had not yet been identified. The mess hall supplies were being used as a cover. The implications hit hard. This was no simple smuggling operation. This was intelligence moving in and out of the camp under the cover of ordinary food shipments. And the cook, the man who had access to every delivery, every crate, every schedule, was at the heart of it. The camp was shaken to its core. Soldiers felt betrayed. They had trusted the man who fed them, the man who seemed harmless, and yet he had been standing at the center of something dangerous all along. But the mystery was far from over. As they dug deeper, more questions rose. Who was supplying the cook? Who was receiving the hidden shipments? How long had this been going on? And perhaps the biggest question, why had no one noticed until Rex barked? The officers tightened security, doubled patrols, and placed the cook under heavier guard. Investigators from higher command were summoned. But Miller knew one thing with certainty. This was not over. Rex had not just uncovered hidden documents. The dog's nose had caught something bigger, something still lingering in the air, something buried deeper than a crate of rice. The pieces were moving. The puzzle was growing clearer. And Miller knew with a cold certainty that Rex would not rest until the final truth was unearthed. Because the cook's secrets were not yet fully revealed, and the next discovery would not just shock the camp, it would change everything. The camp had changed. Once steady with routine and order, it now carried an edge that no drill or inspection could smooth away. Soldiers moved quicker, voices stayed lower, and suspicion hung over every glance. It was no longer just a military camp, It was a place waiting for something to break, and at the center of that tension was Rex, the German Shepherd who had refused to let go of a scent no one else could sense. The discovery of coded documents hidden inside the food crates had confirmed that something dark had been moving through the camp's veins. But it did not explain everything. The soldiers wanted answers. Who was behind it? How deep did it go? And what exactly was the cook hiding? The cook himself sat under strict guard, his protests growing quieter each day. He no longer shouted his innocence. Instead, he seemed to shrink under the weight of eyes that no longer saw him as harmless. He had blended into the background for so long, yet now he sat exposed, every secret threatening to spill. But the secrets were not his alone. Rex kept circling the mess hall storage area. Despite the documents already uncovered, the dog refused to stop. His nose pressed against the same floorboards, his body stiff, claws scratching until the wood splintered. Miller watched him closely. Rex was telling them something. There was more, something hidden deeper. So the officers authorized one final search. The mess hall was cleared. Soldiers pried open the floorboards where Rex had clawed for days. Dust rose into the air, coating their uniforms as wood cracked and gave way. Beneath the surface lay a hollow cavity lined with metal sheeting, and inside that cavity, weapons. Crates filled with small arms, explosives and components that no cook should have had access to. Each piece meticulously packed, hidden beneath the very floor where soldiers had eaten their meals every day. The sight froze the men in their tracks. It was not just smuggling anymore. This was preparation, a plan, something that could have torn the camp apart from within. The cook's role became undeniable. He had been using his position, his invisibility, to funnel weapons and intelligence right under their noses. The deliveries, the false crates, the hidden compartments, it all connected. Rex had been right all along, but the danger was not over. As investigators from higher command arrived, more details emerged. The cook was not working alone. The weapons were part of a larger network feeding off military supply chains. The coded documents pointed to coordinated movements, plans that stretched beyond the camp itself. The realization struck deep. This camp had been marked as a weak point, a place where trust could be exploited and routines could be used as cover. The cook had been a piece of a far larger puzzle, and the final blow came when investigators revealed that a scheduled delivery just days away was not carrying food at all. It was carrying enough explosives to cripple the camp. If not for Rex, it would have arrived without question. Soldiers would have unloaded it, unaware of the disaster hidden inside. The damage would have been catastrophic. The truth shook everyone. What began as a single bark at a cook had unraveled an entire operation designed to infiltrate and destroy from within. The days that followed were filled with intensity. The cook was taken away under heavy guard, his secrets finally exposed. Supply chains were restructured, patrols doubled, and officers drilled into every soldier the importance of vigilance. But amid the fear and betrayal, one figure stood as the undeniable hero, Rex, the dog who had refused to let go, who had barked when no one else would have suspected, who had scratched at floorboards until the truth was pulled into the light. The soldiers who once laughed at him now looked at him with awe. They replayed the moment he first barked at the cook, realizing how easily they could have dismissed it, how dangerously close they had come to disaster. Miller knew it too. He had trusted Rex from the beginning, but even he felt a chill when he thought of what might have happened if they had ignored the dog's instincts. A week later, the camp gathered in the parade yard. The air was still sharp with tension, but that day carried a different weight. The commanding officer stood tall before the assembled soldiers, his voice carrying across the field. They spoke not of drills, not of schedules, not of orders. They spoke of Rex. The officer recounted how one dog's refusal to be silent had uncovered weapons, documents, and a plot that could have destroyed the very camp they stood on. He spoke of vigilance, of loyalty, of instincts sharper than human judgment, and then, in front of the entire camp, Rex was awarded a Medal of Honor. The soldiers erupted into applause, their voices echoing off the hills. Rex sat beside Miller, chest proud, eyes bright, as though he understood the gravity of the moment. For a brief time, the fear and betrayal that had haunted the camp lifted, replaced by pride. They had faced a hidden danger, and because of Rex, they had survived it. That night, as the camp settled into uneasy peace, Miller sat with Rex outside the kennel. The stars glowed faintly above, the wind rustling against the barracks. Rex lay with his head resting on Miller's boots, his breathing steady. Miller thought back to the first bark, the puzzled looks, the disbelief. He thought about the hidden crates, the false papers, the weapons buried beneath their meals. And he thought about how one dog had seen what no one else could. The mystery had been solved, the danger had been stopped, and though scars of mistrust would linger, the camp was safer now, because of Rex. The soldiers would carry the memory for years. They would remember the cook who seemed ordinary but hid destruction beneath his apron. They would remember the whispers, the fear, the moments when trust cracked. But most of all, they would remember the German shepherd who refused to give up, whose bark broke the routine and saved them all. And that memory would echo in every soldier's heart, the knowledge that sometimes survival rests not in the eyes of men but in the instincts of a dog. Stories like this show just how powerful our canine heroes really are. And trust me, you don't want to miss the next unbelievable case I'll be sharing. So hit subscribe, tap that like button, and join the community before the next mystery drops.